They told me my son's death was an accident. Then I heard a recording of school officials discussing how to handle him and what to do if he didn't break. That's when I knew my son wasn't buried with the truth. 2 hours after my son's funeral, his teacher called, and I realized I never knew him. Revenge story. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. 2 hours after I buried my son, my phone rang. I was still wearing black. The dust from the grave was still under my fingernails. The image of his coffin being lowered into the ground had not left my eyes. It blinked with me, followed me, refused to loosen its grip on my chest. People were still in my compound, but I couldn't hear them anymore. The prayers, the murmurs, the forced encouragement, everything sounded distant, like I was underwater. I stood alone in my son's room. His room didn't know he was gone. His school bag leaned against the wall, exactly where he always dropped it. One strap twisted, careless. His books were arranged neatly on his table, titles written in his handwriting, precise, disciplined, obedient. The boy I thought I knew. On the wall, a timetable stared back at me. Study harder. Don't disappoint Dad. Be better than yesterday. My throat burned. I raised my hand to touch the wall, but my fingers trembled. I had raised this boy alone since his mother died. I taught him discipline, respect, silence, strength. I believed those things would protect him. I was wrong. The phone rang. I ignored it. It rang again. I stared at the screen. Unknown number. I almost threw the phone onto the bed. What else could anyone possibly want from me today? I had already given the most expensive thing a man could ever give, his child. The phone rang a third time. Something inside me tightened. I answered. Hello. There was a pause. Then a woman spoke, her voice careful, as if stepping on broken glass. Good afternoon, sir. Am I speaking with Mr. Dave? Ethan's father. My knees went weak. Yes, I said. Who is this? My name is Mrs. Daniels. I was Ethan's English teacher. The room tilted. My son's funeral was this morning, I said slowly. I know, she replied. I just found out a few hours ago. And when I did, I realized I had waited too long already. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped, still shaped by my son's body. The smell of his deodorant hung faintly in the air. Why are you calling me now? I asked. Silence. Then she said, because your son trusted me with something. And now that is gone, I don't think I have the right to stay silent anymore. My fingers tightened around the phone. What are you talking about? Another pause. Longer this time. Sir, she said quietly, you did not really know your son. The words hit me harder than the news of his death. I knew my son, I snapped. I raised him. Yes, she said gently. You raised him to be strong. But he was fighting battles you never saw. My heart began to pound. What battles? He was scared, she continued, and hurt, and trying to expose something that put him in danger. I stood up. My son died in an accident, I said. That's what the police said. On the other end of the line, she exhaled. Sir, it was not an accident. The room went silent. I looked around, at his trophies, his uniform folded neatly, his Bible with pages marked and underlined. Not my son, I wanted to say. But memory betrayed me. The way he stopped talking at dinner. The bruises I once noticed and ignored. The nights he stayed awake, pretending to read. The fear I mistook for teenage moodiness. Who hurt him? I asked, my voice breaking. I can't explain everything over the phone, Mrs. Daniels said. But I need you to understand this. Thomas came to see me the night before he died. He told me if anything happened to him, you would be the one to finish it. Finish it. The words echoed in my skull. What was he trying to do? I whispered. Before she could answer, a loud knock hit my gate. Hard. Sharp. Demanding. Mrs. Daniels' voice dropped. Sir, are you alone right now? My skin prickled. There are people, she continued, who do not want this truth to come out. Please be careful. If you agree, I'll come to you tonight. I'll show you everything your son left behind. Everything. The knock came again, angrier this time. Sir, she said urgently, do you hear me? I looked at my son's school bag. At the words on the wall. Don't disappoint Dad. Yes, I said. I hear you. The call ended. And in that moment, standing in my dead son's room, I realized something that shattered me completely. I had buried my son that morning. But I was only just beginning to know who he really was. If you were the father, would you chase the truth your child died protecting, even if it turned your grief into a war? I didn't sleep that night. Grief doesn't allow sleep, it only changes positions. When I lay down, it pressed on my chest. When I sat up, it wrapped around my throat. When I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas at 6 years old, holding my hand too tightly on his first day of school because his mother was already gone and I was all he had left. People think strong men don't cry. They're wrong. Strong men just learn how to cry quietly. I spent the night walking through my house like a stranger. Every object carried his fingerprint. His slippers near the bathroom. His jacket hanging behind the door. The cracked mug he insisted on using because it was lucky. I had raised him to be disciplined, controlled, respectful. In my house, emotions were managed, not displayed. I believed love was shown through provision, not conversation. I worked 2 jobs after his mother died. I believed food on the table mattered more than stories at bedtime. I believed silence was safer than questions. That belief haunted me now. By morning, I had made tea I didn't drink and sat in a chair I didn't remember pulling out. My sister, Sophia, hovered in the doorway like she had something to say but didn't know how to say it. You should rest, she told me softly. I'm fine, I replied automatically. She looked at me the way people look at men who are clearly not fine. You haven't eaten. Thomas didn't eat yesterday either, I said, then immediately regretted it. Her face folded. She reached for me, but I stepped away. I didn't want comfort. I wanted answers. Sophia had always said I was too hard on my son, that I expected too much. That boys needed softness too. I always replied that the world was cruel and softness would kill him. Now the world had killed him anyway. After she left, I opened Thomas's wardrobe. It felt like a violation, a betrayal. But something inside me insisted, you've already violated him by not seeing him while he was alive. I searched slowly. Shirts, trousers, socks folded with military precision. Everything screamed order, control. A boy desperate not to be noticed. Then I found it. A notebook hidden beneath his school uniform. Not a school notebook. Personal. My hand shook as I opened it. The first page stopped my breath. If you're reading this, Dad, it means I didn't make it. I dropped the book. My knees hit the floor. I don't remember how long I stayed there. Minutes. Hours. Time dissolved into something meaningless. When I finally picked the notebook up again, my vision blurred, but I forced myself to read. He wrote about fear. Not teenage fear. Not exam fear. Real fear. He wrote about men who smiled in public and threatened in private. About being watched. Followed. About being warned to stay in his place. About trying to tell someone and being told to keep quiet. He wrote about me. Dad doesn't ask questions. He believes silence is strength. So, I'll handle this myself. Each sentence stabbed deeper than the last. By afternoon, I understood one painful truth. My son didn't hide his suffering because he didn't trust me. He hid it because I taught him to. The gate creaked open. I stood instantly. Mrs. Daniels arrived just before sunset. She looked nothing like the image I had built in my head. Not dramatic. Not mysterious. Just tired. Eyes heavy with regret. A woman who had waited too long. She sat across from me, clutching her bag like it contained something dangerous. I should have pushed harder, she said before I could speak. I should have gone to the authorities earlier. You should tell me everything, I replied. And she did. She told me Thomas was brilliant. Too brilliant. That he had uncovered irregularities at school, grades manipulated, scholarships sold, powerful parents protected. She told me my son had evidence. names, dates, messages. He refused to back down, she said, even when he was warned. Who warned him? I asked. She hesitated. There are people connected to the school board. Businessmen. Politicians. My jaw tightened. And the bruises? I asked. Her eyes filled. He said falling downstairs would be easier to explain than the truth. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Grief was still there, but something darker joined it. Resolve. I walked to Thomas's room and stared again at the wall. Don't disappoint Dad. This time, I spoke aloud. I won't, I said. Not again. Not ever. And as night fell, one thing became clear. They thought they had silenced my son. What they didn't realize was that they had just awakened his father. The first threat came disguised as sympathy. It was the morning after Mrs. Daniels told me everything. I had just finished washing my face when a black SUV rolled slowly past my gate, then stopped. The engine didn't turn off. It idled, patient, confident, watching. I stood still. In my years of living in this city, I had learned something important. Decent people knock. Dangerous people wait. The horn didn't blare. The gate didn't shake. Instead, my phone buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. My heart thudded once. Hard. I answered without speaking. Mr. Dave. A man's voice said smoothly. My condolences on your loss. Losing a son is unimaginable. I didn't respond. We only want peace, he continued. Your boy was young. He didn't understand how things work. These situations, they get misunderstood. The SUV's tinted window slid down an inch. I could see a hand resting casually on the door. What situation? I asked. A chuckle. Low. Amused. Exactly, the man said. There is no situation. Which is why we'd appreciate it if you didn't go looking for one. My grip tightened on the phone. Are you threatening me? Of course not, he replied. I'm advising you. You've already lost enough. The call ended. The SUV drove away. I stood there long after it disappeared, my pulse roaring in my ears. The fear came fast, but it didn't stay long. Fear needs uncertainty to survive. What replaced it was clarity. They were scared. Not of me. Of what Thomas had left behind. That afternoon, I returned to his notebook. This time, I read it like a man preparing for war. Dates. Names. Locations. Small details that meant nothing alone, but together formed a pattern. There was a flash drive taped inside the notebook's back cover. My son had been smarter than I ever knew. I plugged it into my laptop. Emails. Audio recordings. Photos. Conversations I was never meant to hear. Men laughing while destroying futures. Threats disguised as jokes. Promises of protection exchanged for silence. And then, one video. Thomas's face filled the screen. He looked straight into the camera. Not scared. Resolved. If you're watching this, he said calmly, they already know I didn't stop. Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want you dragged into this. But if they touch me, it means the truth is bigger than my fear. I had to pause the video. My hands were shaking too badly. That was the moment I made my decision. I would not go to the police, not yet. I had seen how reports disappeared. How files went missing. How powerful men smiled at cameras while burying justice behind closed doors. No. First, I needed leverage. I needed to understand the enemy. That night, Mrs. Daniels called again. Her voice trembled. They came to my house, she whispered. They asked questions about you. Did you answer? I asked. No. But they're watching. So are we, I said. She went quiet. I wasn't the same man she had met yesterday. Neither was I the man who had buried his son. Grief had sharpened me. Listen carefully, I told her. From now on, we document everything. Every call. Every movement. If they want silence, we give them noise. A pause. Then, softly, you sound like your son. I closed my eyes. That's the point. As I ended the call, my laptop chimed. An email notification. Subject, We should talk. No sender name. Just an address made of numbers. I opened it. One sentence. Your son was brave. Don't let his bravery be wasted. Attached was a document labeled Final List. Names I recognized. Names I didn't. Names that explained the SUV. The call. The fear. I leaned back in my chair, heart hammering, not with dread, but with purpose. They had made a mistake. They thought killing my son would end the story. But stories don't end when truth is unfinished. They begin. And I was no longer just a grieving father. I was a witness. A threat. And very soon. A reckoning. I stopped living like a grieving father and started living like a man being hunted. Every sound meant something now. Every car that slowed near my gate. Every unfamiliar face at the junction. I learned the rhythm of fear, not the panic kind, but the quiet, calculating one that keeps you alive. I took time off work without explaining why. My boss didn't press. In this country, people understand when silence is safer than curiosity. I copied the files onto 3 different flash drives. One stayed with me. One I hid inside Thomas's old physics textbook and placed it back on his shelf, untouched, unimportant looking. The third, I wrapped in plastic and buried beneath the mango tree behind my house, right where Thomas and I used to sit during power outages, talking about nothing and everything. I wondered how many times the truth had been buried in this city. Mrs. Daniels and I became careful allies. We never spoke on the phone longer than necessary. We used coded language. Lesson plans meant documents. Exams meant threats. Staff meetings meant danger. She told me others had tried to speak before, teachers who were transferred suddenly, students whose records vanished, parents who were warned politely and then not so politely. Thoems wasn't the first, she said one evening when we met at a small roadside cafe. He was just the one who refused to stop. That both broke and rebuilt me. I watched her hands as she spoke. They shook slightly. This wasn't bravery. It was guilt. The kind that sits heavy in the chest and demands repayment. Why did you help him? I asked. She looked up at me. Because he reminded me of the kind of person this world crushes first, the honest ones. That night, the first red herring appeared. A journalist contacted me. Said he had heard rumors. Said he wanted to tell Thomas's story. His questions were sharp, almost too informed. He asked about the flash drive before I ever mentioned it. I smiled. Lied. Fed him nothing. 2 hours later, Mrs. Daniels called. They're spreading a story, she said. They're saying Thomas was involved in exam fraud. That he was blackmailing staff. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. They were trying to turn my son into a villain so the truth would rot before it could breathe. The city swallowed the lie easily. Lies are lighter than truth. They travel faster. Neighbors started avoiding my gate. Whispers followed me to the market. Pity curdled into suspicion. Good. It meant they were afraid of what I might say. But the pressure didn't stop. One evening, I returned home to find my front door unlocked. Nothing was missing. Everything had been touched. Drawers opened. Clothes shifted. My laptop moved an inch from where I left it. A message. We can reach you anytime. I sat on the floor of Thomas's room and breathed slowly until my hands stopped shaking. Fear wanted me to run. Rage wanted me to burn everything down. I chose patience. That night, I watched the final video again. Thomas's voice steadied me. Dad, he said softly on the screen. If they scare you, it means you're close. Close to what? The answer came days later. Mrs. Daniels uncovered the real structure behind it all, a scholarship fund tied to a development project, funneling money through the school. Children of the powerful passed easily. The rest were filtered out quietly. My son had followed the paper trail. And someone had decided he was expendable. As the web revealed itself, so did something else, something unexpected. Hope. Not the naive kind. The dangerous kind. Because hope meant I believed this could end. And if it could end, then someone would lose. Let me ask you something quietly, right here. If lies were destroying your child's name after death, would you stay silent to stay safe, or would you risk everything to restore the truth? Hold that thought. The betrayal came from the one place I never thought to guard. My home. It started with a knock I didn't expect and a face I trusted too much. My younger cousin, Ethan. He arrived one afternoon with a bag of oranges and the practiced sadness of someone who knew what to say. He had stood beside me at the burial, held my shoulder, called Thomas my boy. I let him in. That was my mistake. We sat in the living room, the television muted, grief filling the spaces between words. He spoke about faith, about letting God handle vengeance, about moving on. Too much emphasis on moving on. Brother, he said gently, you've suffered enough. Sometimes, the dead need rest more than justice. I studied his face. Ethan had always been ambitious, always knew people, always found ways into rooms I never asked about. I had admired that once. Now, it chilled me. That night, after he left, my laptop wouldn't turn on. I opened it. The flash drive was gone. Cold spread through my chest. I checked the shelf. The physics textbook, untouched. The buried drive, safe. Only the one I carried had vanished. I sat down slowly. The truth assembled itself without mercy. Ethan had been sent. Not to threaten. To retrieve. I called Mrs. Daniels immediately. They have someone close to you, she said before I finished speaking. They always do. Rage threatened to tear through my ribs. But then something unexpected happened. An email arrived. From K. I tried to protect you. You didn't listen. Attached, a recording. I played it. Ethan's voice. Another man's voice. Negotiating. Just get the evidence, the other man said. We'll handle the father. Silence. Then Ethan replied. No. He's already lost too much. My hands trembled. Another voice entered the recording. Calm. Authoritative. The boy died because he refused to understand his place. Don't make the same mistake. The recording ended. My stomach turned. Ethan wasn't the villain. He was a coward trying to save me by sacrificing the truth. And the voice at the end. I knew it. Everyone did. A respected man. A philanthropist. A regular face on television panels about youth development. The chairman of the school board. That was the moment the story changed. This wasn't just about my son anymore. It was about a system that fed on silence. Mrs. Daniels met me that night, eyes blazing with purpose. We release everything, she said. Now. No, I replied. Not yet. She stared at me. They're closing in. I know, I said. That's why we wait. Because now, I understood something crucial. They thought they had won. And men who think they've won, make mistakes. If someone you loved betrayed the truth to protect you, would you forgive them or expose them anyway? Everything collapsed within 48 hours. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Efficiently. Like men who had done this before. My bank account was frozen first. No explanation. No warning. Just a polite message from the bank informing me of a temporary compliance review. The word temporary mocked me as my card declined at the ATM. As the cashier looked at me with suspicion when I couldn't pay for bread. Then came my job. I was called in and asked to take indefinite leave. My supervisor wouldn't meet my eyes. He spoke in rehearsed phrases about company reputation and ongoing investigations. He said my name was circulating in places it shouldn't. By the time I got home, the power had been disconnected. Darkness settled into the house like it had been waiting. I sat on the floor of my living room, back against the wall, listening to the hum of generators from neighboring houses. Life continuing everywhere except where I was. This was their message. We can erase you without touching you. Mrs. Daniels went silent that same night. Her phone rang unanswered. Messages unread. I drove to her apartment before fear could stop me. The door was open. Her place was ransacked. Papers scattered. Drawers overturned. The smell of panic still hung in the air. She was gone. That was the moment despair finally caught up to me. Not the sharp kind. The heavy one. The kind that sinks into your bones and whispers, "You failed." I drove aimlessly until fuel ran low, then parked beneath a bridge and sat in the dark. The city roared above me, uncaring. Headlights passed like strangers' lives crossing paths without ever touching. I thought of Thomas as a baby, How he used to curl his fingers around mine as if anchoring himself to the world. How he trusted me completely. And how I had taught him silence. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel. "I'm sorry," I said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. "Sorry I didn't ask. Sorry I didn't listen. Sorry I waited until you were dead to become brave." That night, fear won. I considered stopping. I considered taking the buried drive and destroying it. Considered letting my son's name remain stained if it meant I could survive what was left of my life. I even drafted a message to Ethan. "You were right. I'll let it go." But my hands wouldn't send it. Instead, I opened Thomas's final video again. I had avoided the ending. This time, I watched until the very last second. He looked tired. Older than his years. But his eyes were steady. "Dad," he said softly, "if you're watching this and thinking of stopping, I understand. I was scared too. But some truths don't die with the person who carries them. They look for someone stronger. And if that person is you, then I'm proud." I broke. Not quietly. I cried like a man who had lost everything and finally accepted it. When the tears ended, something else took their place. Stillness. Clarity. They had taken my comfort. My job. My safety. But they hadn't taken the truth. And they hadn't taken my son's voice. I drove home just before dawn. As I stepped into the house, my phone vibrated. A single message. From unknown. "She's alive. Don't trust anyone. Check the mango tree." My heart stopped. I ran to the backyard, digging frantically with bare hands, soil tearing under my nails. I pulled out the wrapped flash drive, muddy but intact. Attached to it, taped carefully, was a small piece of paper. In Thomas's handwriting. "Darkness doesn't mean defeat. It means exposure is close." I sank to my knees. For the first time since my son died, hope returned. Weak. Fragile. But alive. And I understood something at last. This was the point of no return. They had pushed me past fear. Past grief. Past loss. And when men like them do that, they create something far more dangerous than an enemy. They create a father with nothing left to lose. Morning came without permission. Light slipped through the curtains like it had something to prove. I hadn't slept. I didn't need to. Something inside me had shifted, quietly, decisively. Fear no longer sat in the driver's seat. It had moved to the back, seat-belted and silent. I washed my face, changed clothes, and stood in front of the mirror. The man staring back at me looked thinner. Older. But his eyes were clear. For the first time since my son died, I knew exactly what to do. I went to the mango tree again, more carefully this time, and retrieved the drive. Back inside, I powered the laptop using a borrowed generator cable from a neighbor who didn't ask questions. I opened the files slowly, methodically, as if they might explode if rushed. There was more than I'd seen before. Thomas had organized everything. Folders labeled with dates. Audio trimmed and titled. Notes attached explaining context, patterns, risks. He hadn't just collected evidence, he had built a case. And then I found the key. A document named Safeguard. Inside were instructions. If I disappeared. If Mrs. Daniels disappeared. If the story stalled. There were contacts, journalists outside the city. NGOs. A legal aid group that specialized in whistleblower protection. And one name circled in red. Emily Thompson, independent prosecutor, retired. My heart jumped. Emily Thompson was known for one thing: she couldn't be bought. They forced her into early retirement because she refused to bend. People like her didn't disappear, they were sidelined. I drove to her address that same afternoon. She listened without interrupting. Didn't gasp. Didn't dramatize. Didn't promise miracles. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me. "Your son was very thorough," she said finally. "And very brave." Her words hit harder than praise ever could. "They're watching me," I said. "They've already taken everything else." She nodded. "Good. That means they're scared." She agreed to help, but on one condition. "We do this clean," she said. "No leaks. No half-truths. When this breaks, it breaks everywhere at once." That night, Mrs. Daniels resurfaced. A burner phones. One short call. They tried to make me sign a statement, she whispered. I refused. I'm safe for now. I closed my eyes. We're close, I told her. Hold on. The plan formed quickly after that. Not revenge fueled by rage. Justice fueled by precision. We would release everything, simultaneously, to multiple outlets. Evidence too dense to dismiss. Too public to bury. Too coordinated to silence. And I would do one more thing. I would speak. Not as a witness. As a father. If you had one chance to speak for someone who can no longer speak for themselves, what would you say, and who would you say it to? The truth didn't explode. It unfolded. Quiet at first. Almost polite. At exactly 6 a.m., the first article went live. Then another. Then another. By 6:07, my phone began to vibrate non-stop. Not calls, not threats, but notifications. Mentions. Messages. Screenshots flying across platforms faster than anyone could contain. Emails. Audio recordings. Videos. Documents with signatures they couldn't deny. Thomas's work. My son's voice. The headline that finally broke the dam read. Students silenced for exposing education corruption. Evidence implicates top officials. I sat alone in my living room, generator humming, watching the story spread like fire in dry season. Television stations cut into morning programs. Radio hosts abandoned playlists mid-song. Names were laid out loud. For years, those names had lived behind closed doors. Now they lived in public. The chairman of the school board went live before noon, smiling tightly, denying everything. He called it a smear campaign. A tragic father's delusion. Then Emily Thompson released the recordings. His voice. Clear. Calm. Indifferent. The boy died because he refused to understand his place. The smile vanished. By evening, arrests began. Not all. Not enough. But enough to change the air. They came for me that night. 2 men. Plain clothes. Polite. Official. I knew this moment would come. I went with them willingly. At the station, they questioned me for hours. Tried to shake me. Tried to confuse timelines. Tried to imply motives. I answered simply. I'm not here to win, I told them. I'm here to finish what my son started. By morning, I was released. Outside the station, cameras waited. I hadn't planned to speak, but the words were already inside me, heavy and necessary. My son was not a hero, I said into the microphones. He was a child who believed honesty still mattered. If that belief cost him his life, then the cost is too high for any society to justify. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. And somehow, that hurt them more. The chairman resigned by the end of the week. Investigations expanded. Scholarships were reinstated. Records reopened. Other parents came forward. Other students found courage. Mrs. Daniels testified. Ethan called me, voice breaking. I'm sorry, he said. I know, I replied. That was enough. Late one night, after the noise faded and the house grew quiet again, I returned to Thomas's room. I erased the words on the wall. And wrote new ones. You made me proud. The days that followed felt surreal. I returned to my house, now calm. The walls no longer whispered grief, they whispered memories. Thomas's toys were still there, untouched, but I stopped seeing them as reminders of loss. They were reminders of courage. Of a boy who refused to be silenced. I walked through his room slowly. Every notebook, every school project, every carefully folded uniform spoke to me in ways I hadn't heard before. I finally understood him, not as the quiet, obedient child I thought I had raised, but as a young man full of bravery, principles, and quiet defiance. He had lived and fought in ways I could never have imagined, and I had only been a witness from the sidelines. I picked up his notebook, now stained with tears, and read the final lines one last time. Dad, don't be afraid to speak. Don't be afraid to fight. Don't ever let them silence you. I smiled through my own tears. Mrs. Daniels came over that evening. We sat together in the living room, reviewing what had been accomplished. The network of corruption had been shaken. Some were behind bars. Others were under investigation. A few had vanished from the public eye, never to return. Justice, imperfect but undeniable, was taking its course. "Your son did this," she said softly, almost in awe. "He didn't just gather evidence. He created the catalyst." "I just finished what he started," I said. "I only followed the path he laid out." Ethan visited too. We sat under a tree, the one where Thomas and I had once shared quiet afternoons. "I was scared," he admitted. "I didn't want to get involved. I thought protecting you meant staying away from the truth." "You protected me," I replied. "In your own way. But we can't let fear rule us again." I realized then that my grief had transformed into purpose. The rage and despair that once threatened to consume me had been refined into resolve. I had learned to see Thomas not just as my son, but as a teacher, someone who had shown me what courage looked like, what honesty meant, and what it meant to fight even when the world seemed to be against you. Months later, I established a foundation in Thomas's name, supporting students, uncovering corruption, and protecting whistleblowers. Every success, every protected child, every injustice exposed became a tribute to him. I still miss him every day. I always will. But the emptiness in my chest no longer threatens to pull me under. It's tempered by pride, by purpose, and by the knowledge that my son's voice, his bravery, still echoes through the lives he touched. Standing at the mango tree one quiet evening, I whispered into the wind, "I understand you now, son. I finally understand you." And in that moment, for the first time since that funeral, I felt whole again. If someone you loved left unfinished battles behind, would you have the courage to continue them? Share your thoughts below. Let your voice honor those who can no longer speak. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.